Okay, ladies and gentlemen, today we are doing a tier list, a short tier list that is, ranking every iteration, every official DLC and release of The Binding of Isaac. Isaac Games tier list? Yes, exactly, that's what we're doing here. 6 iterations of the game that I've played over the years. How old is Isaac? The Binding of Isaac release date. The first game's got to be like 10 years old at this point. 12 years. September 28th, 2011. Dang, I should have waited until September 28th to do this. Anyway, we have 4 different tiers. I looked at this tier list. I found this tier list on Tier Maker and I thought it was fun to do. It originally had a 4th tier below bad that was called No. But like, I don't know, I think 4, it's only 6 games, right? It's only 6 games, so we're gonna divide it into 4 tiers. I think that's fair. If I need another tier over the course of the process, I'm gonna go for it. But we're gonna get started with the original Binding of Isaac, and that game was quite the banger, I might say. I'm gonna put it in good tier. Original Binding of Isaac, the Flash version, it released. It was a rather small game. Honestly, like it went back when I started playing this game, it went to Mother, and then after beating Mother, you would go to the womb and beat Isaac's heart, and after 10 times, you would unlock It Lives and a potential at the time. A potential to go to Satan. Satan wasn't actually a guaranteed boss. Like you'd have to get lucky and have a devil deal open at the end of the mom's foot fight. The mom's heart fight, to be able to go to Satan, and that's pretty much the extent of it. There was only this one final boss. There was no splitting path after It Lives, so your run either ended after It Lives or if the devil deal opened at Satan. There were only 7 characters, the original 7 that the 7 character speedruns stem from, and it was overall a really good game. I mean, you might remember me from my last Week of Isaac event where I played Flash Isaac for the day, and it just has a special place in my heart. I actually wholeheartedly prefer the visuals of the Flash game to the ones of Rebirth, right? Like, I think the visuals are much better in Flash Isaac. For me personally, that cartoonish look fits the game a lot more. And you didn't have as many items like we have nowadays, which are just like repeats of items we already have, right? Like we just did a run where we started with that fear item, the one that fears enemies that get close to you. And nowadays we also have Venus, which does the same thing with charms enemies that get close to you. There's a lot of copy paste stuff. We have like 25 or so different followers. I'm just guessing here. It's not, and Flash Isaac just didn't have all of this stuff. It was a rather limited game in terms of size, but it was so good. And that's not even to mention, I'm seeing it in chat right now, the music. Oh my god, nothing beats that Danny B soundtrack. It's just so much better. But yeah, original Binding of Isaac, it's a bit of nostalgia speaking, of course, because it was the first iteration of Isaac. It's how it all started, but it was a good game. It was a really good game. Then came Wrath of the Lamb, which was the first and only expansion to Flash Isaac. And Wrath of the Lamb really shifted that game into 2nd gear, or maybe 3rd gear even. Like it was insane. Wrath of the Lamb added the cathedral path and the chest. It also made it so after, if I remember correctly, that after after It Lives, you would always get the light beam and the trap door, and you could decide where to go. So that was the first time we could actually like consciously go to Mega Satan after every run. But funnily enough, for the first 2 weeks or so after Wrath of the Lamb released, the Polaroid was actually, first of all, the Polaroid was a trinket in Flash Isaac, and then it was also not a guaranteed drop. So you'd have to get lucky and find the Polaroid on your run to be able to go to the chest. But that was only for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then at some point Mom's foot started to guarantee drop it, which is also why nowadays you get the Polaroid from Mom's foot. You can tell that Probs drives the Golf. I don't know how you come to that conclusion, but I don't. But yeah. Wrath of the Lamb made Isaac much, much better. Like, way better than it was before. It was a huge step up. All the items that were added felt really meaningful still. And it was just the time, dude. So Wrath of the Lamb is going to be the first one that's going to get put in amazing. Although I might move it down to the top of good. I'm not 100% sure yet. Actually, yeah, I'm going to put it on the top of good. We're going to put it next to, but definitely ahead of Binding of Isaac. I'm going to tier these, like I'm going to rank these within their tier. So further to the left is better. But yeah, Wrath of the Lamb is just, it was such a good game. Then, years later, I think, when was Rebirth? Isaac Rebirth release date. November 4th, 2014. Oh yeah, that was like half a year after I started streaming Isaac on the regular. November 2014, that fateful day where Isaac Rebirth came out. And it was everything we ever wanted, right? It was yet another step up from Wrath of the Lamb. It had everything that had, plus more items. It was fantastic. I don't actually think Rebirth at the start... Oh no, right. Rebirth at the start added the lamb, right? So it introduced the Polaroid and it reintroduced the Polaroid at the end of the mouse foot fight, but then also the negative, which got us to the lamb, which was the newest boss added in Rebirth. It also added the boss rush, which was nice, as well as a few new characters. Although one of my main criticisms with the original 11 characters, yeah, it was 11 characters, right? One of my main criticisms with the OG 11 characters still stands, is that they were way too similar. Like I always said from the get-go how I hate how I can load up a cane run and then I go into an item room and find the D6 and boom, suddenly I'm no different from Isaac, right? I thought from Rebirth on, character abilities should still be original to them, the way that tainted characters do nowadays. And they never did that. So yes, they added new characters, and at least the Zazel and Keeper felt somewhat original. And I mean, Lost was like the obligatory no-hit character. Lost was legitimately one of the stupidest things ever introduced to Isaac when it was new, because first of all, he didn't have a Holy Mantle nor a D4. Yeah, he started with the D4 actually. Nowadays he has the Eternal D6, which is vastly superior. But yeah, he used to have the D4, which was just useless. And then eventually they gave him the Holy Mantle, at which point you couldn't use the D4 anymore because the Holy Mantle would get rerolled. It was just an absolute shit show. Like it was ridiculous. And that's not even to mention the fact that, you know, there was this stupid whole ARG thing that Edmund wanted to do with the Lost Unlock. And... and nobody liked it, and he got data mined, and then he got really mad, Edmund that is. And it was just, I mean, it had its few flaws, but overall Rebirth was all we ever wanted to. And for the longest time I said Rebirth was the best iteration of Isaac, right? So Rebirth goes straight into amazing tier. It was great. I'm not saying it's going to stay in the top spot for the rest of this tier list, you'll have to see, but Rebirth was fantastic. It was a clear step up from Wrath of the Lamb. It was a ton of fun. I probably put over 2,000 hours into it before I stepped away from it for reasons that were not related to Rebirth, and it was fantastic. Then came Afterbirth, and then, well, Afterbirth is the first iteration of the game where I started to actually feel a downwards trajectory with the game. Afterbirth introduced a lot of items, which I don't know off the top of my head yet, that I know just left me sorely disappointed. I think Afterbirth was also the era where they started adding those co-op babies, and suddenly like half the new unlocks we got in that game were a bunch of co-op babies that probably like 80% of the player base never got to use. It was bad. It was just bad. Did Afterbirth, was Greed Mode Afterbirth? No, Greed Mode was Rebirth, right? Remember risk versus reward, neither did Edmund then. What did Afterbirth introduce in terms of bosses? Did AB actually introduce anything? I mean, it introduced a bunch more floor bosses. Yeah, Greed Mode and Keeper are AB. Man, that's how forgettable Afterbirth is. Delirium was AB+. What did they add? See, that's how... Oh, Hush is AB. They added Hush? Okay. Was AB... Boss armor and Afterbirth? Oh, yeah, right. The boss armor incident. Lilith is AB too. Lilith was a fairly original character, so that gets the pass. Portals on every... Oh god, yeah, I totally forgot about that. Right, in Afterbirth, we also had portals on every floor, and they had like 1,000,000 HP. And those were, I'm pretty sure, only removed in Repentance. Boss armor, oh my god. It was just such a step down. A lot of redundant items that were just reskins of items we already had. It was not a good time. Like, you can tell from the fact that my memory of it is rather bad. That I just wanted to forget it. So Afterbirth is just gonna go into the F tier for me. It made the game quite a bit worse, and when we thought that the game was already at its lowest, then came Afterbirth Plus. There was a thread on Reddit the other day that I can't get out of my head, which was just a picture of Delirium and Ultra Greed, and it says Ultra Greedier, that is, because that was introduced in AB+. And the post literally just said, do you remember when we got hyped for a new DLC in Afterbirth Plus, and then we got 2 badly executed bosses and a handful of co-op babies, and they called it a DLC? Yeah, that was AB+. It just added a bunch of badly designed bosses, and then they dipped. Like, and then we also, I think it was in the AB+ era where we got the infamous "there's no unavoidable damage" line. AB+ added charge bars. Well, that is one step in the right direction, and I'll give them that. There were also a lot of booster packs that got released during the AB+ era, which I seem to remember made the game a bit more enjoyable, but I think a lot of you heard me talk about how during AB+ is when I actually quit the game and didn't stream it for like 3 years plus because it was just that bad. Like, Delirium and Ultra Greedier in particular left such a bad taste in my mouth that I just moved away from the game. I didn't have any desire to play it anymore. To this day, Afterbirth Plus, like the Afterbirth Plus era, was actually the only era of Isaac where I did not 100% all Steam achievements. I never did. I just couldn't bring myself to it because it was so stupid. So AB Plus is actually the only DLC for me that goes into the bad tier. Like, it's just that garbage. Afterbirth, you know, the Hush fight and the boss armor, it was kind of bad, but Hush was manageable. But Delirium just put this whole thing to a whole new level. And yes, nowadays I actually include Delirium in my deathless streaks, and I can beat him fairly regularly, but he's still stupid. And like back in the day, we also didn't have stuff like A+ and Ghost Pepper, which were coming out in Repentance. So beating Delirium with the Lost literally just boiled down to finding a gnawed leaf, because there were very few items really good against Delirium. I think part of why I can actually make it to Delirium consistently these days is because Repentance actually introduced quite a number of items that are pretty good against Delirium. I remember people asking you about Isaac back in 2019. People always ask me about Isaac. People asked me about Isaac in 2015. Like, I would stream Isaac for 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then one day I wouldn't stream Isaac, and people would ask me, why aren't you playing Isaac? Did you quit the game? Do you not like Isaac anymore? No. Turns out I play more than one video game in my time. That might be shocking to you, but yes, I play games other than The Binding of Isaac. When I turn off my stream, I do in fact not sit here for 16 hours and wait to turn it back on. But yeah. That's every... Oh yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that this experience is exclusive to me. I know other Isaac streamers went through it. I know other streamers that don't play Isaac go through it still these days. But yeah. Anyway. So last, but certainly not least, comes Repentance. When Repentance came out, I thought I would return to the game for another 1 to 2 weeks and then let it rest. But I can say hands down that Repentance is everything I wanted from this game ever. Except for a Delirium fix. But other than that, other than them never fixing Delirium, Repentance literally did everything right. I mean, okay, they gave the second phase of Mega Satan boss armor, but when you play that fight, it actually feels okay. Like, it showed me that you can do boss armor correctly. They gave him a low amount of boss armor, but not too much to the point where you can't steamroll him if you're really powerful. Same goes for the second phase of Ultra Greenier. He has boss armor, but it's not unbearable, quite the contrary. Aside from that, it added a hell of a lot of great items. It introduced item rarity tiers, which at the start when Repentance came out, it really felt like you would see the same 5 items every run, but it doesn't like that anymore. Items are neatly grouped in rarity tiers based on their quality now as well. It just feels really great. When Repentance came out, there were a ton of complaints about how the game got a lot harder, but to me that's a step in the right direction because it's a roguelike. It used to be hard. One thing, especially during the Rebirth era, that I always complained about is how Rebirth felt a hell of a lot easier than Wrath of the Lamb. It's also really easy to see why, because in Wrath of the Lamb we would get Brimstone and we get like +2 damage from Cole because that's how they interacted in that game, and then we'd call that a build, right? Brimstone Cole, and that's what we beat the game with. And Isaac, Blue Baby, they had the exact same amount of health as they have in Repentance, right? Same goes for Satan and stuff. And that's what we had. Like, if you had a Book of Revelations, you'd call it GG because it was one of the few ways to consistently generate health. We don't have these problems anymore these days, of course, but yeah. What I'm saying is we needed more damage in the transition to Rebirth because the game was going to get way more expansions, and like Delirium is pretty much unbeatable with the kinds of builds that we'd call GG in Wrath of the Lamb. But yeah, like said, aside from the Delirium fix that's probably never coming because Kilburn announced he retired from Isaac and from programming, or from working on that game, we're probably never seeing the Delirium fix, which sucks because it's an inherently bad boss. Like, I can't stress this enough. Delirium is just a badly designed boss. He teleports on top of you, he telefrags you, he spawns tears inside you. It's stupid. If Delirium wants to kill you in like a mid-tier run, he's gonna kill you. But other than that, Repentance did all the things right that Isaac had to do right, and I still maintain to this day that Repentance is the best iteration of Isaac that we've all had ever. So basically, the OG Isaac started out really solid, then came Rebirth, which massively improved on them. Then the game took a nosedive in the next 2 DLCs. And in the end we are at a point where the game is enjoyable for everyone who did not think that it was ruined by the Maw of the Void nerf. But yeah, that's my personal tier list for the Isaac iterations. If you watched until this point on YouTube, let me know in the comments where you agree and disagree with me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give the video a like, and I'll see you in the next one.